Introduction to Computers Information Systems. Next section we're going to talk about are networks. So we've already talked about a little bit about a computer system, a little review. We talked about hardware, software, people, and networks, and how they work. We've distinguished between data and information. You should be able to distinguish it. And we talked about we input some data, we use software to process it, we see some kind of output, we figure out a way to store, typically, the data, and then we transmit it. And we're going to learn about how this works, everything from your smartphone to a server, client-server situation. We're next going to talk a little bit about networks. So we already covered binary numbers, bits, binary digits, 8 bits give us a byte. I talked about data, convert it into something useful, information. Process, saving, and that. So our next step is to talk a little bit about computing networks. How can we move data from one device, our smartphone, to another device, somebody else's smartphone, maybe just a text message? So we're going to split networks into two types. Local area network, typically in the same geographical area. Okay, like in your home, maybe in a store, here at the college, maybe on a campus. Typically under one supervision or one administration, and you can communicate without having to move across the larger geographical area. A wide area network is usually over a longer distance, where you have your network here, or a device in your home network needs to communicate to a device at another location. And to get the connection, we typically need a service provider. A service provider. You'll hear me talk a lot about that during the entire year. So retail stores have a network. You scan your product, it goes out to some server, gets the price, brings it back to the checkout. So they have LANs, and the retail stores like a Walmart, their stores are all connected so they can see what products are selling where, so they have a WAN. NIACC, we have a LAN on campus. We can communicate and store things and communicate to items right there on campus. We also have a WAN. We have other campuses, like at Charles City, connected to the college. And we must go through some type of provider to get between those two locations. A lot of people have some type of network at home, and that would be a LAN. And most any businesses nowadays have some type of LAN or WAN. Talk a little more about that later. Network media. The term media can be used in a lot of different ways, but here's what we're trying to do. We're trying to figure out how to get these bits physically moved through a network. Very common method is through copper wire. Twisted wire pairs in which we can send electricity. We get these volts, and they can represent ones and zeros. I talked about that earlier. So we can have wired. Category 5, Category 6, Category 3. This has been used, this twisted wire pair has been used for years in the telephone. And they have gotten much better in terms of performance. Wireless we can send the signal through the air. It can be a radio frequency, like a Wi-Fi. You know, you could be in a hotspot area or in an area. If you have a device, you can connect into the network for Wi-Fi. Now, we also have the different types of, for example, smartphones that can connect to a data network, which is different than Wi-Fi. We can have two devices, like two smartphones, talk to each other, and that might be through Bluetooth, or you might have another means of having a keyboard talk to your tablet through Bluetooth. And we'll learn more about that in the networking. So we can send it through a wire using electricity. We can send it through the air using 2 or 3 different technologies. Microwave is another one I haven't even mentioned yet, between 2 towers. Send it through the air, or we can send it through these small glass tubes called fiber optics, which is a very good means of sending it. Maybe a little more expensive, but a very good way to send it. We actually send light through the tube. Okay? Wired, there's a lot of it around. That's an advantage. It's easy to work with, believe it or not. Not as secured as fiber. Performances have really gotten better, where you can get a lot of, remember I mentioned bits per second earlier on. You know, we can get up to a gig, and we'll learn later on what that is, bits per second, but that's faster than a meg, or 100 million, and so forth. We'll talk more about that later. Wireless, now wireless used to be more of a slow medium, but it's getting much better. It's still the biggest disadvantage is you're sending the signal through the air, and it's harder to secure a signal in the air. Now you can do things like encryption and all that, but you're still sending it through the air, you have those issues. Whereas wired, you can protect that a little bit more from people having access to it. Fiber optics has more advantages than disadvantages, except for maybe the cost. That would be a disadvantage. But fiber is extremely fast. We can send a lot of bits through it, and it's also one of the more secured methods of sending information. All right, I'm going to go to the next page, and we're going to talk about the value of networks, and we're going to bring resources. All right. So, we can share data. That is probably the most important area in terms of networks. Share data and information. We can process it and share data and information. We do that all the time. I mean, anytime you use Facebook, that's what you're doing. You're sharing information. Anytime you send text message, or you tweet, or we look up something in any search engine. Okay, if you think when we search and find some information out there, we're sharing information. It's huge. We've become such an information society, and technology has allowed us to do that. In networks, for example, in your house or whatever, you can share printers, so you can have one printer and lots of people can use it. Okay, that's an example. Or you have a server that has a hard drive and storage, and lots of people can save stuff on that hard drive. More about that later. We can share software. You can have a server that has some software on it. Maybe I'll make this software green. It can have some software stored here, and then we can share that out to multiple people. Now you need to be careful. Just because you have a software package that you purchased from a vendor doesn't mean you can distribute it unless you have a license to do that. Some software, open source software that's free, you can distribute as much as you want. Some proprietary software, you would have to have a site license indicating how many different users can use that software at one time. Got to be careful about that. And then we'll finish up here with the internet. The internet is not considered a wide area network. What it does is it allows us to create wide area networks. The internet connects networks. It comes from the word internetwork. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Cloud-based computing comes out of this use of the internet. We can look at the internet as this cloud that connects all these different networks, devices connected into it, whether it's at your home or some business, you can connect in. And cloud-based computing exists to the fact that you're either storing your information out here, maybe in Dropbox or iCloud or somewhere is coming out of the cloud, or you're running an app out of the cloud, some application. For example, in our class, we're using Google Docs to do some particular things, and we use those applications and they actually run out of the cloud. They don't run on our specific computer. We'll talk a lot about cloud-based computing. Uses of the internet, it's extraordinary. There's so many things we can do by connecting networks, like purchasing items, and selling items ourselves, taking care of our banking, our financing, just doing business, paying bills, etc., etc., etc. Lots of good examples. Access to the internet, there's a lot of ways you can access the internet. At home, you can buy services from an internet service provider. Okay, we talked briefly about the service provider earlier. If they provide access to the internet, they're an internet service provider. I have that right here. Also, you can have access on the college campus. You can get access through hotspots. Your data plan on your phone gives you access to the internet lots of different ways. The value, we're going to work on a group project and talk about the value, what value added, has the internet created for us. And we'll talk about whether it's individual, business, education, society, and others. Be prepared to discuss in class. Finish up with another little diagram. Again, we have our devices, our hardware devices. And I mentioned a little bit earlier, there can be at some location, let's say at, I'll just pick Dell. They're going to sell computers, and they have servers with hard drives that have all this information about their computers. So Dell has this hardware in their network at their location. We can have some devices in our network, let's say at our house. Okay? We can use the internet then. You notice the internet itself, there's nothing we actually ever get in the internet itself. We connect into the internet through a service provider. Dell connects to the internet through a service provider. And now we have some type of WAN connection. We're going through some type of service provider, and we happen to be using the internet. And we can have we're actually having a network here talk to a network here. That's why it's called the internetwork, the internet. And some businesses, let's say Walmart, they have a store here and a store here and a store, and they have their network in this store doing its work, and this one and this one. And they probably have more than 4, they have thousands. And they're able to use a service provider to connect these stores. It's much more complex than this, but they don't necessarily have to go through the internet. They can pay a service provider or multiple ones to connect their stores. This also then would be considered a WAN. All right, And that's it for today.